And we are live from the wonderful SportsLink studio in Muncie, Indiana. This is the HB Toss, made possible by the creative storytellers of Ball State SportsLink. I'm your host, Swiatek, alongside my co-hosts, Massey, and Dane. After another crazy week of NFL action, we're in for a good one.
Definitely, AJ. And this week is special in particular because there's rivalries going on, and there's some revenge games this week as well.
Certainly, it feels like every week of the NFL season getting more and more important as time goes by. Dane, I won't waste any time. We'll get into our first segment here for Week 13, the biggest movers. And Dane, we'll talk about teams moving both up and down in the power rankings across all platforms. And one that kind of surprised me, the team that's moved up the most this week, the 49ers, after a 13-0 win over the Saints. And I'll tell you what, they haven't given up any second half points since Week 8.
That's crazy, AJ. And it's all about the defense for the 49ers. They've been the talk pretty much ever since Kyle Shanahan has stepped into the reins for the 49ers. That defense has been electric ever since he's been there. You got Nick Bosa running that front four, and it's Kyle Shanahan-led team is just unstoppable. With an unstoppable defense is just something that you can't miss with the 49ers. I
mean, that it is. The offense starting to fire on all cylinders. They got Christian McCaffrey there now, of course. And really, even though his stats, they may not jump off the page as many expected, I mean, this offense, it is rolling. You've got McCaffrey there. You've got Deebo Samuel. Jimmy Garoppolo is a winner. He plays winning football. And this 49ers team, they're climbing up power rankings for good reason. I mean, they have snuck under the radar. They're now back on top comfortably of the NFC West over the Seahawks. Defense, front seven's playing well. Offense is starting to click. And all of a sudden, this is one of those teams, if you're in the NFC, you do not want to have to face on any given Sunday.
Certainly, AJ. And it's just Jimmy Garoppolo in general. I'm a big Jimmy G guy. He wins games. He reminds me kind of what Baker Mayfield did for the Browns in 2020. He's not really that guy that's going to be like a franchise guy. He's not going to win an MVP or anything like big like that. But he can go out and he can win games. And that's what I kind of love about Jimmy Garoppolo. And he kind of took the 49ers to the Super Bowl in 2020. And I just love about Jimmy Garoppolo is just the fact that he can win games. He can go pull out big games, especially this week. He can pull out big games. And he's just a franchise player. He's a really good guy that Kyle Shanahan really trusts to put the ball in his hands and sling the ball.
Well, yeah, Dan, I'll tell you what. Well, you could win with Jimmy Garoppolo. This next team moving up, they are winning because of their quarterback. The Bengals, they're coming off a 20-16 win against the Titans. And I'll tell you what, after at the start of the year, people were really harsh on Joe Burrow and what that Bengals team was doing. He's figured it out. This offense is clicking, and the Bengals, they're headed in the right direction.
Certainly. And with this offensive line, you saw some questions on the offensive line, especially going into this year. They struggled going forward, but now they're starting to click a little bit. Jamar Chase is coming back this week, hopefully dealing with a surgery, and he's coming back this week. And this Bengals offense is just going to get even better now that Joe Burrow has that Jamar Chase connection to him. And the Bengals, just expect them to keep going up on the big board.
Well, yeah, I think that really speaks to what Zach Taylor has built over there in Cincinnati. They've been without Jamar Chase now for about a month, but they have held their own. They've got T. Higgins, they've got Tyler Boyd. Joe Mixon has taken that step that a lot of people have been waiting for him to in these last 2 years of his career, and all of a sudden this Bengals team, they're in serious contention to repeat for AFC North, especially after that Ravens loss.
Certainly, and you look at the Ravens, look at the AFC North, it's very, very close. You know, you got the Browns and the Steelers obviously probably out of the contention for the AFC North, but that Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow connection coming out of LSU, it's a very special connection. We saw it last year with their Super Bowl run. This year, it's even more potent. It's even more of a problem for other teams in the AFC, not only in the AFC, but in the NFL as well.
That it is, Dane. We talked about the teams moving up. There's two sides to every story. Teams moving down. And Dane, I mean, what is going on? Tom Brady and the Buccaneers, they lost in overtime at the Browns. And I'll tell you what, heading into the year, I don't think anyone thought this Buccaneers team would have a losing record through Week 12.
Well, we'll start off with just talk about the NFC South in general. That entire NFC South is just abysmal this year. Now, there's always that division every year. It kind of just is not great. It's kind of just below standards, below everybody else. But people are asking, how is Tampa Bay in that playoff picture right now? It's because they have that 4 seed right now with the NFC South in their hands, and you can't really go wrong with Todd Bowles and that Tampa Bay offense. Tom Brady is just, I think it's just the age that's catching up to them. I really do. I think Brady's starting to you can kind of see he's starting to wear down a little bit, but you can't really go wrong with Tom Brady. And I think that if they do end up making the playoffs and winning that NFC South, Tom Brady will probably end up just going vintage Brady. But for now, it's just, I don't really know what's going wrong in Tampa Bay. It's just a lot of things that are going wrong down there.
Well, it's hard to rely on vintage Brady coming back when he's playing the way he is right now. I mean, it's not to take away from the guy. He is the GOAT, undisputed, all those Super Bowl rings. But right now, he's got Chris Godwin, he's got Mike Evans, he's got Leonard Fournette. He has a serviceable offensive line, but this offense is struggling to put up points, only putting up 17 against a Browns team that has really been struggling. Jacoby Brissett not doing them many favors. That Browns defense, they're on the field a lot, but Tom Brady just unable to capitalize. And you mentioned it, this Buccaneers team, I mean, they're feeling really lucky to be in a playoff spot right now.
Definitely, and you look at the talent on the offensive side of the Buccaneers. You got Leonard Fournette, you got Mike Evans, you got Chris Godwin. So much talent, and Brady is just the offense is unable to put up that many points, and it's just a really unfortunate thing if you're Todd Bowles in that Tampa Bay coaching staff.
And Dane, we talked about the Buccaneers, another NFC team that lost to an AFC team this week, the Cardinals. They let the Chargers come all the way back. Cliff Kingsbury and company, I mean, the seat's never been hotter. They lose 25-24 versus the Chargers.
You said it better than I could have. Cliff Kingsbury's definitely on a hot seat. And it's not necessarily that I don't like Cliff Kingsbury. I just don't like the system that he runs. I'm not really necessarily a Kyler Murray person also. Like that offense, you got, Marquise Brown is obviously a person that, Kyler Murray relies on. But that team just can't get anything right, especially with the record they're sitting with now. And it's just, my question really is Cliff Kingsbury time, should they fire him now or should they fire him after the season, really, for the Cardinals? And my answer to that is probably at the end of the season. You probably can get a top 5 pick, possibly. But if you're Cliff Kingsbury, you just can't be happy with Kyler Murray and that offense and just that team all around. You got to be worried if you're Cliff Kingsbury in that coaching position.
Well, Cliff Kingsbury, he's one of those guys who failed twice in a row. Fired at Texas Tech, somehow a good enough interviewer to get the job in Arizona, take that first overall pick in Kyler Murray. And, I mean, he hasn't played well this year by any standards. He's been a bottom half of the league quarterback in just about every statistic. It's time for a change. It's time for a new scenery in Arizona that starts at the head coaching position. I think every Cardinals fan will tell you Cliff Kingsbury's time, it is spent, barring a miracle. I mean, this is a team that has so much talent on paper that every year just cannot put it together.
Certainly. And it's just, you look at Kyler Murray, a guy who is supposed to be kind of like a Lamar Jackson kind of guy. He's supposed to be able to run the ball, throw the ball. But he's also been dealing with some injuries, with some injuries. He's been sidelined for a couple of games. But if you're Cliff Kingsbury, you got to be on the hot seat. He definitely has a big target on his back coming into this week.
And that he does. Dane, we'll move from a negative segment to something maybe a little bit more positive. Let's talk about the teams in the playoff picture. And Dane, first time segment, I'm excited about this one. Let's start with the AFC. Currently at the 5 seed, we have the Miami Dolphins after the Bills just knocked off the Patriots on Thursday Night Football. So that AFC East, top of the division, still something to watch. The Bengals, they're at the 6th seed. The Ravens just ahead of them in the AFC North. The Jets, they sit at the 7th seed. And then 8, 9, and 10, this is where it gets interesting. The Chargers, the Patriots, the Colts, they're all still looking to get into those playoff spots. Dane, who's a team that you're watching to maybe sneak into the wild card here?
Now, it's going to be a little bit off the radar, but I'm going to talk about the Browns here. It's just a really surprising team, and I'm a Browns fan. So it's kind of you can call this bias maybe, but when I look at the remaining schedule of every single one of these teams, I think that Cleveland has the easiest schedule out of everybody. They play Houston, Cincinnati, Baltimore, New Orleans, Washington, and Pittsburgh. There's 3 divisional opponents there. There's Cincinnati, Baltimore, and then they play Pittsburgh. They do really successfully good with Kevin Stefanski at the helm against Cincinnati, so expect them to probably get a win there. And with Houston, they might get a win depending on how Deshaun Watson plays coming into this Houston game, which we'll probably get into later in the show. Depending on how he does against Houston, Cleveland controls their own destiny going forward. And honestly, they could possibly win out here. They could possibly clinch a wild card spot, a late wild card spot. Very, very late, probably a 7 seed. But if you're a Browns fan, there's, as much as their record shows, there's still some hope there in Cleveland.
Well, Dane, the fact of the matter is it's going to come down to if it's the Deshaun Watson we got used to seeing in Clemson and in his latter time there in Houston, or if he's lost it. Because if Deshaun Watson comes back, he's a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. Heck, who's to say the Browns can't go on a bit of a run? But they've dug themselves in a hole, already sitting with more losses than all those teams we mentioned. They're not even in the hunt graphic, as you like to see on CBS all the time. I mean, they're not even on there. They're currently not even considered in the hunt for a wild card spot. Definitely a bold take, but you're certainly putting some confidence here in Deshaun Watson, that Browns team. thinking they could win out. I mean, that's a tough schedule. You called it easy. The AFC North, they're sticking with the best of them right now, having to beat Cincinnati, having to beat Baltimore. You have to assume if they drop another game, this is probably a team that's out of the playoff race. So for me personally, I don't see the Browns sneaking in there, especially with how good and how deep that AFC is right now. But I'd like to hear a little more insight on why you're going with the Browns.
I'm going to go with the Browns strictly because they do really good against divisional opponents under Kevin Stefanski. I mentioned that their history against Cincinnati under Kevin Stefanski. Baltimore, their defense hasn't looked as good as people thought it was going to be this year, and Pittsburgh just hasn't looked right with, especially with Kenny Pickett coming in at the helm. I could possibly see them winning those three. Washington has surprised a lot of people by going 7-5 so far this season, and they're going on the road to Washington. And with Houston, that could definitely be a win for that. That could probably be a win for them. And I mean, a very, very strong if Deshaun Watson plays well against Houston and going forward. And it might be a little too close to call. It might be a really, really bold take to say that Watson will probably be back to his form as he was in Houston. And it's a really bold if he plays well. I could honestly see Cleveland making a deep playoff. And that's a very strong if Deshaun Watson does well.
Dane, for me, it's hard to imagine that Deshaun Watson doesn't have a little bit of rust to scrape off after all of this time off from football. And I'll tell you, for me right now, it's hard to imagine anyone getting in except for these three teams in the wild card slot because they just seem to have so much more talent than everyone else. We saw the Patriots. They fell to the Bills. That was the team to me felt like they can maybe sneak in. The Chargers, Brandon Staley, he's not selling me what he's buying there in Los Angeles. Give me the Jets. Give me the Bengals, give me the Dolphins, a mix of those teams. I think they'll end up getting in there. I mean, you look at their remaining schedules, they all really have wins all over them. They get to play each other a little bit. I know the Jets still head to Miami in Week 18. That game will probably have some major implications. The Dolphins, they get a chance against the Chargers here in just 2 weeks. And then the Bengals, they maybe have a chance to leapfrog Baltimore in their Week 18 matchup. For me, those three teams mixed with the four that are already atop the AFC, they're going to stay in their spots. I don't see any movement happening. And if it does, I don't think it will be the Browns. But to each their own. Dane, we talked about the AFC. Let's move to the NFC. And to me, this is one that's a little bit more interesting. The AFC, it feels like those top 7 teams, they have a lot more talent. More importantly, they're much more well-coached than those teams on the outside. But the NFC, this feels like anyone's game. Right now, all 3 teams in the wild card, it's the NFC East. If the season ended today, full division makes it. We have the 5-seed Cowboys at 8-3, the 6-seeded Giants at 7-4, the 7-seeded Commanders, they're sitting at, I believe, 7-5, and then 8, 9, and 10 goes the Seahawks, Falcons, and Lions. Dane, what team are you watching for to make a playoff push?
Now, you mentioned the NFC East, and I'd say there's a couple teams in that division that have surprised everybody. The Commanders especially have surprised everybody. It wasn't too long ago when they were picking number 2 in the NFL draft, and all of a sudden they're sitting at 7-5 with Taylor Heineke at the helm. But a team I'm going to watch out for is one of those NFC East teams I think is going to fall is the Giants. And it strictly goes off of Daniel Jones' play. And I'm just not I think that Brian Dable in his first season, there's bound to be a collapse at some point for one of these NFC East teams. I think it's going to probably be the Giants or the Commanders. But I think that the Giants with Daniel Jones, I don't have a lot of faith in Daniel Jones to lead the Giants to a playoff push. So I'm going to stick with my pick in the Giants to probably fall off that bracket and not make the playoffs this season.
Well, Dane, you gave us a team that's going to fall. I'll tell you who's going to take their place. Give me Geno Smith. He's cooking up there in Seattle. I think the Seahawks, they sneak their way into the playoffs. We've never seen an entire division make the playoffs in this new format. I don't think it starts this year. I think the Patriots missed the playoffs from the AFC East. From the NFC East, I think one of these teams falls out of the picture. The Seahawks, they find themselves just one game back now from the Commanders and the Giants. And listen to this upcoming schedule. They play in LA at the Rams, who are practically eliminated from playoff contention at this point. Then they get Carolina at home. That should be 2 wins. That'll move them to 8-5. At that point, really anything could happen. They get a chance against the Jets. They play the Rams again later in the season. They get to play the 49ers at home. Those divisional games, especially in the NFC West, always so close. The Seahawks, Geno Smith, a team that many projected to have the first overall pick in the offseason, I think they'll make their way into the playoffs.
Now, I love Geno Smith. I love the Seahawks. I like that take for the Seahawks to jump up into the playoff picture. Now, Geno Smith is obviously going to win Comeback Player of the Year. He's got 2 very talented receivers on the outside, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. And you look at the Seahawks team, and they have proved a lot of people wrong this season. Pete Carroll, who was expected coming into the season to be on the hot seat, he was supposed to probably be 5 by the end of the season because he had such a lackluster season. And a lot of people were looking at this team, and they said, you dealt away Russell Wilson. That's such a bad trade. Like this team's going to be in a blow-up soon. And they have proven a lot of people wrong. And I think that this is if you're a Seahawks fan, you got to be excited coming into this late in the season.
Pete Carroll's still got it. John Schneider's still got it. The Seahawks draft class, they're playing good. The Legion of Boom 2.0, as a lot of Seahawks fans are liking to call it. Tariq Woolen, a huge pickup. Kenneth Walker, 2 offensive linemen, and Abe Lucas. I mean, it is a phenomenal draft class that they've got built there in Seattle. They have young pieces in place. This is a team that is set up to succeed in the future. And I'll tell you what, they've got that Denver first-round pick. That'll be an opportunity to take the predecessor to Geno Smith. I really like what they've got cooking up there in Seattle, Washington. Give me the Seahawks to take over that playoff spot. And Dane, we'll head into the next segment now. 4 picks, 4 key games. This time it will be for Week 13. Dan, you know we've got to talk about it. It's my show, the New York Jets. They're going to be brought up, but this really is a good matchup. The Jets, they're going to head to the Vikings in Minnesota, 3-point dogs against the 9-2 squad. Who's going to win this matchup?
I'm going to stick with my gut. I'm going to go with the Minnesota Vikings, but I'm not particularly looking. I'm looking at 2 key matchups here. I'm going to look at the coaching matchup between Robert Saleh and Kevin O'Connell, 2 rookie head coaches going up against each other. 2 have proven to be extremely well-coached teams. But another matchup I'm looking at is the outside between probably the defensive rookie, your favorite, Sauce Gardner, and Justin Jefferson, who's obviously probably one of the best wide receivers in football right now. It's just a matchup that everybody's going to have their eye on. Who's going to probably win the matchup, I don't know. But I'm going to stick with the Vikings here strictly because the Vikings offense is just too potent for that Jets defense to handle. I'm going to stick with Dalvin Cook, T.J. Hockenson, Justin Jefferson, and Adam Thielen. It's just too much for the Jets defense to handle, and I think the Vikings will pull it out here.
Well, Dan, I'll tell you what. You're wrong. First of all, it's Robert Saleh's second year coaching, not his first, and he has looked really good in New York. And this Jets team, they're going to throw and they are going to air the ball out. This Vikings team, 32nd ranked pass defense, and I'll tell you what, Mike White, he can simply orchestrate an offense effectively and efficiently. He gets the ball out of his hands, and I mean, this Mike LaFleur offense, it is built for a quarterback like that. Hammer at home. The Jets, they're beating the Vikings, and I like it to be a rather offensive shootout here. You talked about Sauce Gardner versus Justin Jefferson. That's what everyone wants to talk about. That's the headline. No one's talking about Mike White. The White Lightning is cooking. It's brewing up in East Rutherford, New Jersey. He is going to absolutely shred this Vikings secondary, and he's going to win that starting job.
I think it's definitely going to be an offensive showdown between Mike White and Kirk Cousins, who kind of have a little bit similar style of play when you look at them both play. I like Mike White, but it's going to look kind of like Deshaun Watson. And a very strong if he plays well, he will lead the Jets to a victory. However, if he doesn't, it's going to be a really strong downfall for the Jets coming into this game.
And who would have thought? A shootout this late into the season between Kirk Cousins and Mike White. That's why I love the NFL, and that's why I'm hammering the New York Jets. Mike White, he'll walk away with the victory there. Dane, 2 quarterbacks now who have a bit more of a pedigree. Ryan Tannehill, the 7-4 Titans, they're going to head into Philadelphia, the 10-win team, currently sitting atop the entire standings. Jalen Hurts and company, who's going to win the matchup?
I'm going to go with an upset again. I'm going to go with the Titans, and I'm going to say very, 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 very close. I'm going to say by probably 3 points or less here for this game. But for me, it's Derrick Henry. He's a problem for everyone. He's probably one of the best rushers we've ever seen in this generation. And if you look at this is an A.J. Brown revenge game. He's coming back to Tennessee to play his former team in the Titans. But I think A.J. Brown balls out in this game. However, I think Tennessee just runs the ball all over Philadelphia. And I think that if you look at this Philadelphia Eagles team, there's no way I think they just stick with that one win. I think they probably get like maybe 2 or 3 in. So I think that one of these losses comes to this Tennessee team.
Well, Dan, I'm going to have to disagree with you again because I don't know what makes you think Derrick Henry will be able to run all over this defense. Don't get me wrong, he is a great running back, undisputed top 3 in the league, but this Eagles defense, they are stifling. They haven't let anything up all season long, and I just simply can't pick against the Eagles until they prove me otherwise. They've won 10 games, they've lost 1. I like my odds. I don't think I have to give much of a reason here. Jalen Hurts, top 5 quarterback. Ryan Tannehill, he's closer to the back end. Give me the Eagles to beat the Titans. I'll tell you what, I don't think it's going to be close. I don't think the Titans hold it within 3. I don't think they hold it within 10. Statement victory for the Eagles. They're going to be playing mad after they got that game against Green Bay. A little too close for comfort. Eagles move to 11-1 and show why they're the best team in football.
Yeah. Now you mentioned Jalen Hurts is that guy. He definitely is that guy. Probably an MVP. Probably going to win the MVP this season if and only if he continues the track that the Eagles continue the track that they're going on right now, and if they hold on to that one loss. But there's obviously there's an upset that happens there's something that goes wrong with that one-loss team. And I think it's this week for the Eagles where there's just that one week where they just slip up and the Tennessee takes advantage. I think this is that week for Tennessee.
We'll see, Dane. You talked about Jalen Hurts potentially being an MVP, a guy that a lot of people are starting to like as an MVP. Tua Tagovailoa and the 8-3 Dolphins, they're heading to San Francisco to play the 7-4 49ers. Who are you taking, Dane?
I'm going to go another upset here, AJ, and I'm going to go with the 49ers strictly because it's defense, 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 defense. I love San Francisco's defense. I love Nick Bosa. I can't go against the 49ers. They lead the NFL in fewest yards allowed with 281. Can they continue it with this week with Tua, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and that powerful Miami offense? We're bound to see, but I think that Kyle Shanahan and his defense, they get it done against Miami.
Well, don't go crediting yourself with an upset. The 49ers, they're currently favored to win this game. Give me the Dolphins in upset fashion, and I'll tell you why. You talked about it. This 49ers defense, it's been great. I mean, it's been nothing short of lockdown. But the only bigger staple in this matchup, Tua Tagovailoa is undefeated as a starter this year. He's been the best passer in the NFL over the middle of the field. And until somebody shows me they have any answer for that duo of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle over the middle, they're so fast, they're so shifty. And until someone could beat them, give me the Dolphins to run the table here. The Miami Dolphins, as a Jets fan, not my favorite team, but you've got to respect game. Game recognizes game here. The Dolphins, Mike McDaniel, it will be his revenge game against the 49ers, his first chance to coach against his alma mater, and he's going to get it done.
I think it's very possible he gets it done, but I think that it just comes down to one man. I think it's Nick Bosa. And I think Kyle Shanahan, I think Mike McDaniel coming out of that Kyle Shanahan system, it'll be very, very interesting to see how he adjusts to Kyle Shanahan's system. It'll be very interesting to see how he does that. But I think that Kyle Shanahan outsmarts Mike McDaniel, especially because Kyle Shanahan is such a really good coach. He's a Super Bowl. He's a Super Bowl team coach. I think that he has the tools to win a Super Bowl. He's definitely a Super Bowl caliber coach, and it's just going to come down to coaching for me. You can't go against Nick Bosa and that defense led by Kyle Shanahan. Give me the 49ers to get it done.
Mike McDaniel, he's looked good in his own right. We'll have to see. Dane, we've got one last game on our slate. The Kansas City Chiefs sitting at 9-2. A lot of people's top team in the league. They'll head into Cincinnati, play the red-hot Bengals. Who's going to win?
I'm going to say the Chiefs here. And this matchup, I think, is also another one of those matchups. Don't get me wrong. Every matchup this week everybody's going to be watching this. But this matchup has history behind it, especially after last season. The Bengals, this is a rematch of last season. Burrow versus Mahomes 2. The Bengals clinched the AFC North last year with the last-minute field goal win over the Chiefs. Now, Jamar Chase is expected to play this game after being out with an injury. He will wreak havoc on that Chiefs secondary. And I'm a big Jamar Chase guy. I love Jamar Chase. His ability as a receiver is basically limitless. He's an amazing talent, especially put together with Joe Burrow, who's having another phenomenal year this year after coming off a Super Bowl appearance. Give me Joe Burrow and give me Jamar Chase. They will wreak havoc, but I think that Mahomes will just be too much for the Bengals defense to handle. I think that just give me Mahomes. You can't go wrong against Patrick Mahomes here.
You threw a curveball at me there, Dane. You were talking up the Bengals the whole time. You go with the Chiefs. We're finally going to agree because I'll tell you what, I'm not going to put much thought into this one. I'm going to give you a couple of words, Dane. Patrick Mahomes. He's on a different planet. He's not playing the same level of football that I have practically seen in my entire life. And until he starts falling off the face of the earth, which I don't think will happen anytime soon, I'm going to be picking the Chiefs the rest of the way. Patrick Mahomes, he's going to beat Joe Burrow. He's the better quarterback. He's the better player. He's the best player on the planet. Patrick Mahomes, he's a winner.
Definitely an interesting matchup, especially the second time around. Every matchup is better the second time around, especially between Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes. I do think Patrick Mahomes does outdo Joe Burrow, and the Chiefs get a victory here.
All right, Dane, we'll move to the next segment of the show. We're going to go to Hot Takes. Dane, I'll let you start it off. What's one of your hot takes this week?
Now, I'm going to go back to that. I kind of mentioned it briefly a little bit when we mentioned the Tennessee and Philadelphia game. I'm going to go back to that revenge game for A.J. Brown. I'm going to say he goes off for over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns with a loss to the Tennessee Titans here. I think that A.J. Brown is just one of those revenge games where you just can't afford to miss. And I think A.J. Brown has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder after being traded to Philadelphia. I think he does get it done. I think he does put up an amazing performance in Philadelphia, but Tennessee just pulls it out in the end and gets a victory against A.J. Brown.
Well, they're called hot takes for a reason. Those two kind of contradicting themselves. A.J. Brown to go off, still lose, definitely would be interesting if it happens. Dane, I'm going to go to one that I talked on a little bit earlier. Mike White, how can I not talk about him? Give me him to win the job in New York. This is going to be his team after this game. That Vikings 32nd race pack defense, they don't have a chance against Mike White. He's going to throw again for over 250 yards and another 3 touchdowns. He is going to be crowned the king of New York, which isn't hard to do between him, Zach Wilson, and Daniel Jones. But Mike White, I think he's the answer the Jets have been looking for. Maybe he doesn't have the arm talent of Zach Wilson, but he's got the decision-making of a pro. He handles himself the right way. He goes into the huddle. He's just the kind of leader you want in that locker room. Give me the 27-year-old out of USF in Western Kentucky to win this Jets job.
Who would have thought that Mike White would have put up the performance that he did last week? And I'm going to agree with this. I think Mike White goes off again this week. And against Minnesota, who a team that is really bad, who has a pretty bad defense, especially against the pass this year, I think Mike White could do it again. And I'm going to agree with you on this one. I love Mike White. I love his leadership ability. And I think Mike White could honestly probably go for 303 touchdowns this game. And I'm betting on Mike White to get it done here.
The Jets, they turned to him at just the right time. The schedule, it's getting a little easier. I mean, everyone wants to talk about how beat up, banged up that Bears defense is. This Vikings one might be even easier to pass against. Mike White, he's going to be let into this game. He's going to pick up where he left off. He's going to throw, and he's going to throw effectively. Dane, I know your next hot take's also about a quarterback. Let him hear it.
I'm going to stick with this. I'm going to stick with this. Deshaun Watson going back to Houston to play his former team after being let off for almost 2 years after not playing. How does he do? This is a matchup we never really talked about. The Texans playing the Browns, a game that everybody's going to be watching, especially with those allegations against Deshaun Watson, him coming back after a suspension. How is he going to do against a Texans team that's been pretty mediocre? Is projected to be a first-round pick. It'll probably be the first overall pick this year. How will Deshaun Watson do? I think he plunders in his Browns debut, and he throws for not 1, not 2, but 3 interceptions in his debut and only 1 touchdown, and the Texans get a victory against Deshaun Watson and the Browns.
Dave, let me get this straight. So the Browns are your team to watch to sneak into the wild card spot. You think Deshaun Watson's going to come back and look good, but you think they're going to lose to the Texans. I need a little bit more insight here. What are you seeing that I'm not? How is Deshaun Watson going to come back with this much rust and then after this game come back looking so special? Because I know it's a hot take, but this one's a little extra hot. I'd love to hear the mindset here.
Now, when I looked at the rest of the season, for the Browns this season. And I said if, and a very strong if, Deshaun Watson does play well against the Texans, then the Browns could possibly win out the rest of the way. Do I see him playing against Houston the way that, let's say Jacoby Brissett could play, and especially being laid off after 2 years? Does Deshaun Watson come back and return to his form that he was in 2020? Probably not, because we saw in the preseason game where he did not play well. He didn't look good. He just looked like the quarterback we all expected him to be. But I'm saying that season, a team to watch, if Deshaun Watson plays well and he looks like nobody expected him to be, as in like he goes off against the Texans, then the Browns are a team to watch. But if he's not, then Kevin Stefanski and that Browns organization could be in a lot of trouble for years to come.
And that's the million-dollar question, right? The Browns tried to answer it. They sent 3 first-round picks for the guy. Is Deshaun Watson going to be the guy of the past, or will this rust have a serious factor? I mean, that's anyone's question to answer. Clearly, the Browns, they think a certain way. Other NFL franchises, they think the exact opposite. So it will definitely be interesting to watch. And, Dane, I'm going to go to my last hot take. I'm going to stick in the AFC South. You mentioned the Texans. Let me go to the Jaguars. I think Trevor Lawrence, he's finally putting it together. Give me him to officially turn the corner. He's going to stay red hot. He's going to compile 3 touchdowns and beat the Lions. This is when Trevor Lawrence is officially going to start being regarded as the quarterback that we all saw at Clemson, this prodigy guy who was supposed to be just take the NFL by storm. We saw it last week in the comeback win over the Ravens. He's going to do it again. He's going to beat the Lions. He's going to play effective, efficient football, and he's going to show me why I liked him so much out of Clemson.
Now, I talked to a lot of people who are Jacksonville Jaguars fans, and coming out of this, they thought Trevor Lawrence was going to be the guy, and then his first year, he kind of slumped a little bit with Urban Meyer at the helm. And coming into this year, there was really a lot of unknown expectations, but I do agree that Trevor Lawrence has the tools to be the answer that Jacksonville has looked for so long at quarterback. I do think he does it again, especially against a Detroit team that does give up a lot of points. I do think that, Detroit, because Detroit's a really gritty team, especially that defensive side of the ball. They're a really gritty defense. I think that it's going to be a high-scoring game between Jacksonville and Detroit, but I think Trevor Lawrence, with the amount of points that Detroit does give up, I think Trevor Lawrence can throw it through the air, and he can sling the ball against Detroit.
Well, Dan, let's stay on the high note. We'll go to the last segment of our show. Let's go to fantasy football starts and sits. And we'll start with the good side. Dane, who's someone you're looking to start in all of your leagues this week?
Well, I would say any running back against the Browns because the Browns have the worst rushing attack in the league. They have the worst rushing defense in the league this year. But I'm going to stick with Dameon Pierce, a guy who has struggled in back-to-back weeks. He put up 3.7 points in Week 11 and 4.6 points last week. He's kind of a guy basically overdue for a breakout this year, for basically a career game this year. I think he does it against the Browns because any running back you put up against the Browns is going to look good. And basically any bad player you put up against the Browns is going to look good. But Dameon Pierce is going to be the X factor for the Texans. They need him for them to get a victory against the Browns here. And I think Dameon Pierce probably puts up 20 points against the Browns. I think that he goes for almost over 100 yards and probably a touchdown. I think that this is Dameon Pierce's week, and it's his time to shine against Cleveland.
Certainly. Well, I mean, if you imagine that Deshaun Watson throws 3 interceptions, you've got to imagine he's going to be on the field a lot. Not a take that I have a problem with. Dameon Pierce, I think he absolutely has an opportunity to get it done. And Dane, while I go to my starter, I know that a lot of people are probably going to think I'm going to go with one of those quarterbacks, Mike White or Trevor Lawrence. I think those are implied after that hot take. I'm going to go in a different direction. Let's go to the wide receiver room and let's look at the Green Bay Packers. They've got Aaron Rodgers back there. I like Christian Watson. He's found his way into the end zone 6 times already this season. And that was after missing a boatload of time. I mean, I don't know how else to put it except he simply scores. He's built that connection with Aaron Rodgers. He finds his way into the end zone. That is where Rodgers looks on the deep ball. It's where he looks in the red zone. I like him to get in the end zone this week. And for fantasy owners, that is money. 6 points for the touchdown. He'll add some yards with it. Christian Watson needs to be in your lineup this week.
For Green Bay, that has been looking for a receiver for years upon year after year, Christian Watson is starting to emerge as that number 1 receiver ever since Devontae Adams got traded. Green Bay has been in desperate need of a receiver. Christian Watson definitely has emerged as that guy. You mentioned it, he just scores, and that's what Green Bay needs. They need somebody that can get in the end zone and score. I think Christian Watson does get it done for Green Bay.
Me too, Dane, but we mentioned it earlier. 2 sides to every story. We talked about the starts. Who's someone that you're sitting so much that you're advising everyone out there, stick him on the bench?
I'm not going to say particularly on the bench. I would say if he's your running back 1, I would say maybe on your bench, maybe as a flex or on your bench. But I'm going to stick with Cordell Patterson, the running back for the Atlanta Falcons. He's been struggling the last 3 weeks to get into the end zone. He's had over 10 points, probably like barely on 10, 11. But he's kind of been struggling, not putting up the points that everybody kind of expects him to put up. But I think that Pittsburgh, he's going up against Pittsburgh, who's a top 10 defense against the rush. I just don't like Cordell Patterson this week. The matchup's bad for him, especially the fact that he's not getting in the end zone the past couple weeks. I just don't like Cordell Patterson in this matchup going into Pittsburgh.
I don't have a problem with that. They're liking that BYU running back, Tyler Algier, and you talked about it, Cordell Patterson, 3 weeks in a row without finding his way into the end zone. They're finally starting to get some of those other offensive weapons, the ball through the air. Mariota, he's looking around. Even without Kyle Pitts out there, Drake London starting to get a little bit more of a target share. This is not one I have a problem with. Cordell Patterson, as you mentioned, unless if he's your only option, I would certainly put him on the bench. And another guy like that for me, Dan, I'm going to stick to a running back room. I'm going to go to the Dolphins. I know I said they're going to win. I don't think they're going to do it on the ground. Jeff Wilson Jr., the running back in Miami. This 49ers front 7, they have looked amazing all year. They haven't allowed a good running back output since really week 2. And I expect the Dolphins, if they want to win this game, they're going to be passing the football, and they're going to be passing the football a lot. That has been their mentality all season long. A lot of people came in, they thought this was going to be a Shanahan offense, run the football. No, they've turned to the hot hand, and that has been throwing the football. Tua Tagovailoa, those wide receivers. I mean, you even see Tyreek Hill getting involved in the backfield, and that's what it really comes down to for me. They're going to be throwing the ball a lot. This is a running back by committee at the end of the day, regardless that they traded for him. And a committee with a limited market share, it's not a good investment for a fantasy owner. Stick Jeff Wilson on the bench.
Man, you're killing me. I have Jeff Wilson on my fantasy lineup. I guess I know to sit him now. But Jeff Wilson's a guy who's splitting carries with Raheem Mostert. And you mentioned that they do throw the ball a lot to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, especially coming into this matchup. Tennessee, another good team that's really good against the rush. They're not particularly good against the passing game. Expect Tua Tagovailoa to throw the ball to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle a lot during this game. And just you put, especially with Raheem Mostert being out last week, he's coming back this week, it's just going to take points away from Jeff Wilson, and it's not going to be a good week if you're a Jeff Wilson guy. And especially if you have Jeff Wilson on your lineup, I would just sit him. And possibly, if there's a good running back, just pick up another one.
Well, there you have it, Dane. That's where we're going to leave off this segment. I think that's where we're going to leave off that show. That's a wrap for AJ Swiatek and Dane Massey. This is the HB Toss. Thank you to everyone behind the scenes for making this possible. Tristan Fluhr, Caden Vincent, Charles Smart, and Ryan Stojetz. You listen to the HB Toss, made possible by the Ball State Creative Storytellers.